Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first screencast in our series on presenting your research. The purpose of this series is really to help you do outstanding scholarship in the field of NLP, and I'm also going to try to demystify publishing in the field of NLP. To kick it off, I'd like to focus on the final papers that you're writing specifically for this course. Here are some practical details. These links take you to essential things about writing final papers specifically for CS224U. The first link is possibly the most important. That just enumerates the requirements for the final paper. Please do review it to make sure that you don't get points off for something small that could easily have been corrected just because you didn't conform to our requirements. The next two links are much more about helping you with the substance of this. So the projects file has lots of frequently asked questions and other information about writing final papers for this course, and it also expands out to publishing in the field of NLP. So it has a lot of useful resources when it comes to trying to report out your research to the community. And then this third link here links to some excellent past final projects. Many of them became publications, typically after a bunch of additional work after the end of the quarter, but it is exciting that a lot of these really excellent published papers began in this course. It's very inspiring. For your projects, I just want to review a really important point for me that concerns how we'll evaluate your work. This is from the methods unit for the course, but I want to repeat it here just to emphasize it. We will never evaluate a project based on how good the results are. We do recognize that in our field, as in all scientific fields, publications tend to do this because they have additional constraints on space, and that leads them, as a cultural fact, to favor positive evidence for new developments over negative results. But we, of course, are not subject to such constraints. So we can do the right and good thing scientifically, evaluating positive results, negative results, and everything in between. And this has real consequences for how we do evaluation, right? We're going to evaluate your project based on the appropriateness of the metrics that you chose, the strength of the methods that you used, and maybe most importantly, the extent to which your paper is open and clear-sighted about the limitations of its finding. Those are the things that really matter for us scientifically. And it is a consequence of this policy that you could have a paper that reported state-of-the-art results, but if it's just not a clear and substantive paper, it might not get very good marks from us. And conversely, if all of your hypotheses fell apart and it turned out that all your evidence pointed away from them as being true, but you nonetheless wrote a paper that was clear about those findings and helped push the field forward by steering us away from those hypotheses, that of course could earn top marks, and we'd be very happy to help you report those results out to the rest of the field, because it is important for us to know about these negative findings so that we know where to invest our energy as scholars. Here's a detail that's from the requirements for the final paper. This is the authorship statement. This is just a section where you explain how the individual authors from your team and anyone else who helped out contributed to the final project. You're free to say whatever you like in these sections. If you would like a model, here's a link to the PNAS guidelines, which gives some details and kind of typical statements. The rationale is really just that we think this is an important aspect of scholarship in general, and it's not yet pervasive in the field of NLP, whereas it is in other fields. But we would like it to be more widespread because it just seems like a healthy form of disclosure. That's the real rationale. I want to emphasize that only in really extreme cases, and after discussion with all the team members, would we consider giving separate grades to the team based on what was in the statement. This is really not the intent. The intent rather is this rationale of just disclosing who did what as part of the project. It's really not about evaluation. I also want to emphasize that we have a policy on multiple submissions for this course. It's nuanced and subjective. Here's a link to it. Here are some notes, kind of rationale for this. So first, the policy mirrors the policy on multiple submission to conferences, right? You can't take the same paper and submit it to two different venues with minor modifications and expect to get two publications out of it. And the same thing holds for us when we think about requirements for final papers for this course. This is designed to ensure that your project is a substantial new effort. This does mean that you can't merely submit an incremental advancement over another project that you did. We are trying to push back against the pattern where people would take final projects from previous courses, add a couple of new models, and submit those as entirely new papers. That's just unfair to the people who are starting from scratch. And it's really not the sort of work that we would say is up to the level of a final project for a course like this. Other courses might have different policies at Stanford, but that fact alone is not going to lead us to change our policy, because we do think that this is equitable and also reflecting values that are pervasive in our field, as you can see from the policies on submission to conferences. If any of these policies seem relevant to your work, for example, if you are taking a previous course project and developing it in lots of fresh and new ways, start the discussion with your mentor as early as possible to make sure that they're in the loop about what you're doing. We don't want any surprises when you submit your final paper or after that when it comes to this policy. So just make sure everyone is in the know, and I predict that things will go fine. To close, a brief note about impact statements. For now, an impact statement is an optional section for your final paper, absolutely not required. But this has been on my mind a lot lately. I think it's really healthy that the field is moving toward having authors include impact statements. And so I thought I would exhort you all to consider having that as part of your final paper as well. It does not count against your length limits, and it's up to you exactly what you would disclose as part of this statement. Here are some examples of things that you might include. You could try to enumerate both the benefits and the risks of your research to individuals, to society, to the world. Specifically for the risks, you could talk about costs, again, to the participants, to society, to the planet, where, for example, participant costs would be if you had human annotators doing a really difficult or kind of negative annotation project, you might mention that they paid a certain cost and think about whether the costs were worthwhile. You could also think about cost to society, and that would really probably turn on sort of misapplication of your ideas in ways that might have more harm than good. And of course, if you trained a really large language model or did a lot of experiments, you could think about the cost to the planet in terms of energy expenditures and so forth, just by way of getting us all to think about the fact that our research does have costs, and that we should all the time be thinking about the cost-benefit analysis when it comes to the work that we do. And these disclosures are part of helping us all have that in mind. And finally, I think it might be really inspiring for you to think about responsible use of your data, models, and findings. Never mind really evil actors. There are likely to be people out there who are well-meaning and would like to apply your ideas, but they might be unsure of the limits, unsure of precisely how to do that responsibly. So guidance that you could offer about where your ideas work and where they don't, or where your data are relevant and where they're irrelevant, could really help someone who is trying to just make responsible use of your ideas. You could think about them as part of crafting this impact statement. For other resources, I think it's really great to go through the exercise of doing a data sheet and a model card. A data sheet is a disclosure about a data set that you created or used, and a model card is a similar sort of structured document for models that you develop and release out into the world. They're both pretty long documents, so it's a lot of work to do one in full, but it's very rewarding in the sense that it helps you confront some hard truths about the work that you did and articulate the limits of the work that you did. All these things are really helpful for your scholarship. And of course, these things are helpful when it comes to other people consuming your ideas. So that's highly encouraged. And you could take bits and pieces from those structured documents and have them inform maybe a shorter impact statement that you wrote. And for even more guidance on this, you could check out this survey of NeurIP's impact statements. It has a lot of information about the kinds of things people are disclosing in these statements, and that too could help you kind of figure out what you want to say and what might be relevant to your audience. So again, this is entirely optional, but I hope this is inspiring and interesting for you as a new dimension when it comes to reporting on the work that you did.